Thank you to the Patreon members for supporting the channel. The Iron Teeth had been having a particularly challenging time, but thankfully the next morning, the bad tide ended. Their little stream atop the terrace began pouring out fresh water again, and the fresh water returned to the river below as well. And as the fresh water pushed out the bad water, the earth came alive again. The ground turned green and was ready to be replanted, not to mention the terrible smell was being carried downriver as well. And the Iron Teeth were back in business, replanting the dead crops and the lost trees, pumping drinking water again, and getting to shower for the first time in days. There was a lot to do before things were back to 100%, but the Iron Teeth had successfully made it through their first bad tide. But what about the family division the Iron Teeth had been facing? After taking pity on the Folktails and then being very unprepared for the bad tide, many of the Beavers thought they needed to reprioritize and get back to beaver basics. But not everyone felt that way. Some of the Beavers still had a bone to pick with the Folktails and wanted to keep focused on their feud. A vendetta against the Folktails had unified and motivated the Iron Teeth like nothing else. But now the family was very much split about what they should do. They had to figure it out, and soon. The Folktails were feeling encouraged after the bad tide. They'd had to break their new dam to get rid of the bad water, and the land wasn't turning back to green as fast as they wanted. But overall, they made it through just fine. Vamu had led the family well through a new challenge, though the water around them was still uncomfortably red. But their family was now growing at record pace. So many little beavers running around. It was adorable. But more importantly, it meant they'd soon fill their vacant jobs, like the inventor huts and the lumber mills. And with the farmers stockpiling food and the lumberjacks bringing in new logs, the family was on the verge of massive expansion. And it was all gonna start with fixing this dam. The Iron Teeth had a plan, and the next day, the whole family gathered to hold a formal debate about the direction, leadership, and future of their colony. On the one side was Razi and the Beavers who supported peace. On the other was Azra and the Beavers who wanted to continue the feud. The family was pretty evenly split, and it was up to Razi and Azra to convince the Beavers on the other side. Razi went first, and he spoke passionately. He reminded the family, again, of their history and the progress they had made when they pulled together for the good of the colony. Razi's words were convincing, and several Beavers switched sides to favor a peaceful future. The majority was on Razi's side, but now it was Azra's turn to speak. Azra brought up history as well, the history of pain the Folktails had inflicted, how their cousins had attacked and abused them so many times, and how they needed to stand up for their family pride. And unfortunately for Razi, Azra's speech convinced even more Beavers to switch sides. Razi had lost the support he had gained and then some. Only a few Beavers still wanted peace. The majority of them now supported continuing the fight. Razi and Azra had argued well, and they weren't done, but the day had now come to a close, and the Beavers were dismissed for the night. And not surprisingly, the Beavers all went home and continued to discuss the events of the day. Would the family ever come to agreement on this? Things were nearly back to normal at the Folktail settlement. Almost all the land was green again, and the water was looking comfortably blue. The Beavers were lucky the bad tide had only lasted one day, and now they wanted to make sure they were prepared for any bad tides that would come their way in the future. And of course, that meant fixing the dam. But Vamu had a plan: redo the whole thing. So the builders got to work. They had plenty of materials to work with, and this design made a lot of sense. This dam featured floodgates, which could be raised or lowered as needed. So when the river was normal, they could lower the gates to keep the water flowing and wheels churning. But if a bad tide was coming, they could raise the gates so the river would go around them. It was actually a pretty clever plan. Now they just needed to make it a reality. This was exactly the sort of thing the Beavers needed to kickstart a new season of growth, to finally bounce back from the death wave and really start succeeding again. Was this the beginning of a new chapter for the Folktails? Meanwhile, at the Iron Teeth settlement, the Beavers were gathering for another day of debate. The split was still heavily favoring Azra, but Razi had something up his sleeve. He looked out at the Beavers who wanted war and started making promises. He promised them that peace would bring prosperity. He promised they would see agricultural growth, economic growth, industrial growth, family growth, every kind of growth, if they would just side with him and give peace a chance. Together, they could make their home the best that it could be. They just had to decide it was important enough. And wouldn't you know it, but Razi's speech worked. Wait, nope, a bunch of Beavers were making a snack run? But they came back. And they did side with Rozzy after all. Now Rozzy and the peaceful beavers were the majority, and Azra's support had dwindled. But Rozzy had just given Azra his playbook. If Rozzy could make grand promises, Azra just had to offer even more. He looked across at the beavers now wanting peace, and explained how much easier it is to take than to work. Because the Iron Teeth were going to win the feud, and then there would be a whole Folktails settlement that would be theirs to take. They could even take over and create an Iron Teeth satellite campus. Talk about growing their family. And Azra promised he would deliver. That speech got beavers moving again, though some wanted a snack. But ultimately they did side with Azra, and now the family was split down the middle again. 2 days later, and they were back where they started. The debate was dismissed, and the beavers went home feeling frustrated and confused. As they gathered around their campfires to debrief from the day, one thing was very clear. Most of the beavers were genuinely on the fence, and that's why they kept flip-flopping. They just didn't have enough information. They didn't even know if the Folktails still wanted to feud. How could they be expected to make this big decision? But maybe that was it. Maybe that was the solution. They would invite the Folktails to meet to see where the families stood. That would be the information they needed to decide the future of their colony. The Folktails were not feeling the same disunity as the Iron Teeth. If anything, these beavers were feeling more unified than usual, and it was not because they wanted to feud with their cousins. They were making progress on Vamu's grand new dam design. Their family was growing and taking on more jobs, though the inventor huts were still empty, and they were stockpiling a lot of resources to enable their growth, so they were united and enthusiastic about the work they were doing. They weren't thinking about the Iron Teeth at all. Actually, most of these beavers didn't even remember their beef with their cousins. The feud didn't survive the starvation death wave, if you will. So imagine their surprise when they got word that their cousins wanted to meet. On the one hand, sure, a family reunion couldn't hurt, right? But on the other hand, this wasn't a great time to pause their work. They were on the cusp of exciting progress. Why now? But they didn't want to accidentally start a feud by saying no, so the Folktails agreed to a meeting. The two families met at an old, familiar spot along the river. The entire Folktails family came to look impressive, but they were dwarfed by the huge Iron Teeth family. But they were both here, and it was time to talk it out. Azra went first and offered the Folktails a warm greeting. "Same to you," came Vamu's reply. "Now what do you want?" "We just wanted to know if you're cool," Azra explained. "Our families used to fight a lot in the past. We wanted to know how you feel now." "Our families used to fight?" "Well, yeah, all the time." That doesn't sound right. Who are you again?" "We're your Iron Teeth cousins. How could you forget all the fighting that has happened between us?" "Oof, extended family, huh? Did we send you a card at Christmas?" "No, but you once blew up our leader on Thanksgiving." "You take that back. We don't even know you. Why would we try to blow you up?" "Because our families hate each other. We've been feuding for a long time. We came to destroy you recently, but called off the attack." "You did what?" "Okay, clearly that upset you, but it's all water over the dam." "Oh no! You just crossed the line. You've offended our folktale pride, and we're gonna make you pay. We might not have been feuding before, but we are now." And with that, the discussion was basically over, and both families left. After returning home and getting a good night's rest, it was time for the Iron Teeth to gather once more. The meeting with the Folktails had clarified things, and unfortunately for Rozzy, more beavers than ever now sided with Azra. A few staunch supporters stuck with Rozzy, but the future of the colony was now very clear. Even if the Folktails hadn't wanted to fight before, they did now, and it's not like the Iron Teeth could back down. The debate was officially over, and Azra had won, which left Rozzy and his supporters in a weird spot, but they weren't willing to compromise their beliefs. So Rozzy and all the beavers who wanted peace decided to leave the colony for good. They couldn't fight Azra anymore, but they wouldn't fight for him either. So after gathering some supplies and a quick round of goodbyes, this band of beavers left the home they loved, left the family they cared for, to start fresh somewhere else.
Ah, look at all the lovely beavers. Ah, look at all the lovely beavers. All the lovely beavers are in the colony.
The family was sad to see them go, but they had bigger things to worry about. The Folktails were gearing up for war, and the Iron Teeth needed to prepare. The Folktails were indeed gearing up. The Iron Teeth had threatened and belittled them. I mean, they had also spared them after the death wave, but that was completely beside the point. Who were the Iron Teeth to think they were better than the Folktails? Sure, they were a bigger family, but that didn't make them better. And the Folktails were going to prove it, starting with this dam. Yes, they were still focused on finishing the dam, but this would be their gateway to more power and all sorts of stuff. So really, it was an investment in their new feud with the Iron Teeth. They needed to prepare for this fight, but they were enthusiastic and moving quickly, and they had plenty of resources to do it. They were going to show those Iron Teeth just who they were dealing with. The settlement was abuzz. The Beavers were all worked up. They almost couldn't sleep with this mix of anxiety and excitement, but when the morning came, their attention was abruptly shifted. They saw something in the air, out in the distance. The Folktails weren't sure what it was, but it definitely wasn't there the day before, and it seemed to be heading their way. It had the Beavers on high alert. Was this some sort of attack by the Iron Teeth? Perhaps a preemptive strike to stall their preparations? That would be just like the Iron Teeth, wouldn't it? Not that they actually knew what the Iron Teeth were like, but it was definitely getting closer. The Beavers were on guard, just in case it was an Iron Teeth attack. They watched as it got closer and closer, until finally this little balloon-looking thing flew right over their settlement, right over their heads, and then touched down on a nearby island. The Beavers rushed out to see what exactly it was that had landed in their backyard, and they were quite confused. It was definitely a balloon of sorts, but it had delivered some kind of package. Vamu directed them to bring it back home where she would inspect it, and later Vamu presented to the family what had been inside. The package had contained a letter written and sent out by another family of Folktails. These Folktails claimed to be part of a huge colony called the Collective, which had become a refuge for all Folktails. And the balloon and letter were an invitation to any Folktails out there to come and join this mega colony and be part of the Collective. But what was the family gonna do? Would they leave the settlement they had worked so hard to keep going? Abandon the dam and the new progress they were making? Give up this new feud they were about to start with the Iron Teeth? Well, of course they were. How could they pass up an invitation like this? So Vamu made the call and instructed the family, pack what you can, we leave in the morning. Talk about a new level of excitement in the family. This region had been a challenge for these beavers from the very beginning, and now they were finally going to leave it forever. Meanwhile, the Iron Teeth were preparing for war. They had spent several days debating, and now they had some catching up to do. They had a ton of crops to harvest, and they needed to take care of their, offspring. For better or for worse, the feud with the Folktails was back on. The Iron Teeth colony was much bigger, but the debates may have set them back a little bit. They didn't want to be caught unprepared, so it was go time. Well, for most of the Beavers. The family had shrunk a little, but right now they had to focus on the coming fight, make sure they were locked, stocked, and ready, and hopefully make the first move against the Folktails. The Beavers were a bit on edge, but they were Iron Teeth, and they wouldn't back down from a fight. Those Folktails were gonna get what was coming to them, that was for sure. Especially now that the family was united behind Azra's leadership, the Iron Teeth were a force to be reckoned with. They had gone back and forth and debated this for a long time. Nothing was gonna stop them now, or so they thought. But in the morning, something new was in the air. Literally, it was in the air, something way out in the distance. Surely the Folktails weren't already launching an attack, but it did seem to be coming right for them, and fast. The family braced themselves as this flying glider came closer into view, floating on the wind as if launched from a giant catapult. It flew right over them and their settlement, and then gently landed across the bridge. Of course, the Beavers rushed out to see what it was that had just flown onto their land, expecting some kind of trap, but they were surprised to see a beaver sitting on the glider, an Iron Teeth beaver. So of course that changed everything, and they invited the pilot back to their settlement with them, and excitedly gathered around so they could hear him speak. The Iron Teeth had been preparing for war, but they were not prepared for what this beaver was about to say. He told them that far away was a giant colony of Iron Teeth, much bigger than their settlement, called the Great Society, and that's where he was from. He was a scout, and his job was to find other Iron Teeth colonies, like this one, and invite them to join the society, leaving their old settlements behind to be part of something bigger. The family was shocked, to say the least, but this beaver had shown up on a high-tech glider, so he must be legit, and it didn't take any debating this time. The whole family agreed to go with the scout and join the Great Society of Iron Teeth. They started packing for the journey and said goodbye to their home. It had been a good settlement, but there was no question they were headed for better things. As for the feud, that didn't seem very important anymore. They spent the evening reminiscing and sharing stories, and listening in wonder as the scout told them all about their soon-to-be new home. And when the morning came, the whole family set out for their new home and a new adventure. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap for Beaver Tales. Before I sign off, a couple of quick things. First, thank you for watching. Beaver Tales has been our most watched series ever, so thank you for your support. Second, we have Beaver merch. If you follow the link in the description, you can get yourself a fun Beaver Tales inspired shirt or hoodie or sticker. And third, Beaver Tales may be over, but I'm not quite done with Timberborn. This premiere should automatically direct you to a live stream starting right now, where I'm doing a unique challenge in the new update. So I hope you stick around for that. And thanks again for watching Beaver Tales.